What is up, everybody? Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. I can only imagine what is... Hang on, let me turn this down. What is going to happen this week? Yeah, this is a week where I don't really have a plan. I have concepts of a plan. I have absolutely no idea what direction we may go, up, down, left, to the right. We may even go back into the left for the first time ever. Yeah, this is going to be a weird Globex Open. It already looks like it's going to gap down, maybe about 100 points on the Nasdaq. I couldn't quite tell on ES. Looks like the book was starting to fill in, but grain of salt when you start to look at the bid ask before we get within a few seconds of the open. But from the weekend Wall Street, if you even care about that, I know that really hasn't been relevant since probably 2022. Are pointing to maybe a bit of a downside similar to what we saw last Sunday. So before we jump in and start talking about this week, quick mic sound video check. I think everyone already yelled at me in the chat because I started a little bit of a ramble and rant there to kick things off. So yeah, looks like we're good. We can just go ahead and get going here. How was everyone's week last week? How did everyone handle the new regime that is the Trump volatility, where at any given time, the president can say something and say, for lack of a better word, F your longs, F your shorts, and it doesn't really matter. You should be seeing profit and taking profit in this market. With that volatility, I mean, you got a bit of it throughout the week. Most of these down moves at times, going back even to last Friday and obviously the gap down we saw last Sunday for the open was very much news-driven, tweet-driven, tariff-driven, the new magical word that we are just seeing the beginning of, at least for the foreseeable couple weeks. That is going to be the gotcha and a reason to be a little greedy with your, not greedy, be a little raccoony with your take profits, kind of get in, get out, get your points, do something better with your day. If you catch a good move, don't be holding for Valhalla, or if you're shorting this thing to zero, definitely keep your head on a swivel. So how did everyone handle last week? Obviously we had the gap down on kind of the DeepSeek news, and we just kind of continued to meander and recover. NVIDIA even, I think, got back to 26 or 27, 126, 127s before it kind of reoffered again towards the latter half of Friday. So we did see a bit of a mixed bag of Mag 7 earnings on Wednesday and Thursday, and there's more to come this week. So without it being very much of a news-driven sell down, I don't have a good grip on this week, because we still have Google and Amazon and some of the others reporting this week where maybe they'll be positive. I don't know. The dip in Microsoft seemed to be somewhat bought, at least in the early parts of Friday. So the lackluster cloud growth and forecast that they're spitting out there was kind of shaken off from the markets. It just seems like we're kind of waiting for more news, digesting things, and the market really can't pick a direction that it wants to stay in, albeit it's going back to the old, sell volatility and grind higher. So don't fight it when it's doing that. There were some good short opportunities, but they were triggered on Thursday and Friday by a Trump tweet. So if you're holding out for the president to say something about China or Mexico or Canada or whatever is going to come out of his mouth this week as well, I mean, you shouldn't be relying on that to take a high quality short setup. So look for your opportunities. I think there were plenty last week, but we ended up closing pretty much just below the point of control on what ended up being a kind of weird long traverse of the week's value to finally fill the gap in the early part of Friday's session. I think we actually might have done it in the overnight on ES and then during the session on NQ. But naturally, it took a gap in the Friday Globex session, or Thursday night, excuse me, to actually then go do it. And then, of course, we needed this dump to go fill said gap. So I'm never a big fan of when these things happen. I'm sure we're going to get another one here that we're all going to have to worry about eventually being filled, even if we don't do it in the early part of the session. So, head on a swivel this week. I don't have a great read on this. We closed near the point of control. We are still kind of teetering near the all-time high general area. I don't know if we're going to go hit an air horn at some point this week. I would highly doubt it. What I'd be more looking for is the last few weeks of volume were kind of, let's go back to FOMC. Let's go back to basically before, right after that. I would expect us possibly to kind of traverse and balance in this wider range that we've been in for the last few weeks. So those highs kind of being around the 6105s all the way down to, the 6930s, which could be a reasonable target for downside if we got some weakness into this week. You do have all of this old volume going back to pretty much early parts of January. So I just think there's a good chance, with Mag 7 earnings, the other half of the Mag 7 earnings, with the exception of NVIDIA not reporting this week, I mean, all bets are off. It's hard to have too much of an edge because we could obviously sell down and start drifting downwards, and then Google blows it out of the water and we start moving back up. That's kind of why I say, I have concepts of a plan this week. In fact, my weekly pivot even for this week is not drifting too far. All I did was shift it down a few points to account for kind of the SPX and ES spread. Because this would put us, this pivot is going to basically, by the end of the week, pretty much be around that 60-50 type level. And last week, I kept it at the 60, I think it was 60-80s to 60-84s was kind of the box that I drew. And no surprise, the point of control was there. And this is why when we talk about having levels and things like that, it's not just important to have an idea of hey, I think, buyers are in control or sellers are in control at this level. It's more still going to be what does price action do when we kind of arrive at said spot? Because if you were relying on that pivot, let's say this past week, to make a decision, long or short, or to, be buying off of it or shorting off of it, you got chopped up. And that's kind of why we talk about, you need to watch and see what is the price action really telling us when it gets to that level. That level was respected in some capacity, especially in a week like this, when you see all of that volume or the highest point of the week's volume trading there. It makes sense why I placed it, but it didn't necessarily offer a great trade entry really off of it necessarily. It was just kind of an area of interest where I was looking for, not necessarily this to happen, but kind of telling a story that it clearly is a level that means something to both sides, and it may act as a support and resistance kind of level for now. So you could maybe lean into it a little more this week than you were able to last week. I would note that that balance area that I was drawing, the value area high, at least going back for these last few weeks, is a little higher. So no surprise that we kind of are drifting a little bit wider of that pivot as well. So that's why I said I'm not really trading off of these, but I use them to kind of guide that level of edge where do I feel below this sellers are in control? Yes. I would love to see them, if we were to lose the spot or continue to trade, kind of below that 70, 75 spot, I would expect us to at least rotate down towards the 6,000 spot on the S&P. So 6,000 SPX, which would be roughly around this area of, basically last week's value area low. That 60-30s to 60-25s, depending on the spread going into this week. So I don't exactly remember what it was when we closed on Friday, but I think it was under 30 points now. So something to keep in mind. If we were to kind of lose that area, like I said, we're probably coming back towards the big round number at 5,900. as well as 59.25, 59.30s, this value area low. I just have this weird suspicion that we may kind of hang out in this old value area, or this wider area of volume that we've been in for the last few weeks. It would make sense now. We kind of went and retested that high, failed before making a new all-time high and hitting the air horns, and now we fell back into value where expect some chop, expect some, areas to be defended, but the logic would be we could absolutely go back down towards the previous week's low and kind of see what happens there, especially if we get weakness coming out of what's transpired this weekend and everything going on with the tariffs. And it just would not shock me to see us come down here. And then if we lose that, you're talking about the same area that we've been talking about since November, which is the election lows, which were tested, not taken out a couple weeks ago. So that's where, if you got some real weakness, or you saw the fear of God in this market for the first time since 2022, that's probably where we're headed. And once again, not a long signal, not we're going to blow right through it. It just comes down to what does the auction really tell us if we get down there? Is there interest in taking it out? And then if we came back above 5800s, yeah, by all means, give the shot at longing it. But if we really got some weakness, I don't think I'm going to stand in front and try to catch this knife just yet until the tariff bombs at least are being navigated going forward. It just is a weird time, guys. It's going to be a tough trade. If you're not experienced with trading volatility, this is another week where going into it, seeing kind of how last week unfolded. Yes, we drifted higher, but if the tape is going to be fast and moving like it has been after, the president says something, then you need to be prepared to size down, take your licks here and there when you get stopped out. Perhaps trade micros if you haven't done it. Maybe switch to ES if you're an NQ trader. There's things you can do if you still want to be in this market that will help you survive these type of environments. I'm not telling anybody to change their trading style or change what you're doing, change your strategy, but just be prepared. It may be a little whipsawy, it may be a little thin at times as the market is digesting this new information and seeing how it's going to, affect everything else going on. That would be my piece of advice, is just to, as we always say, when markets get volatile, size down is the easiest thing you can do to protect your capital. If you still want to, be sitting in the markets, that's an idea. But when it gets volatile like this, this is when I typically would have some of my better weeks. I really do kind of thrive in these type of environments. I just know it's not for everybody. So just be careful this week. I think a lot can happen, but who knows where we might go. I didn't know trading a little smaller and minding your stops was bad trading advice. I will just leave that there. All right. On the Nasdaq, same thing, a pretty wide distribution, but failed up near, we still can't even get over the kind of pre-FOMC highs. The same 22,000 area, we didn't even make it up there on Friday, but 900s and 75s and change. We re-offered up there again on Friday. So I take that pretty seriously when I'm, looking at these kind of larger psychological levels and seeing all of this pattern of volume. And once again, we couldn't kind of get over this larger high volume node at 22,000 on the Nasdaq. I just think it's at least for the time being, these highs are being respected and you fall back into this wider area of value. So at 22,000, once we fell in and once again, I've pierced inside 800s, you start to look for a rotation. Do we go all the way back down towards where we kind of opened this week, down to 20,900s? Or do we start chopping in the middle? And the first place I would expect buyers to kind of step in is going to be back at the same area we were talking about, I think, on Sunday. I think I was saying like where we closed actually, 550s was going to be kind of a decision point for the market, which was the previous week's low when we gapped down. I think that was what I was saying last Sunday when I thought my charts broke because we had gapped down so much that it wasn't even on the dang screen. Was 550s was basically that first place that I'd be considering looking for a long, and we closed, right back there. And once again, the point of control in that general area. So same thing. It's kind of a decision point where we're going to open. If we do even open here, I highly doubt it. Still looks like a gap down from what I'm seeing. But I guess we'll have to see. We're going to open here in 10 seconds and I kind of want to pause and watch this. This might be a little weird. And there she goes. Back down to 59. What do we go to? On the low on ES, 59, 53, 54s. NQ gapped all the way down to 21,100. So, welcome to the new normal. That is a little bit of some crazy volatility and gaps. Oh, God, I wish I was still holding my short from Friday. Man, this is like last Sunday, guys, where we just gapped down. What is that? 500 points on the Nasdaq. Did we really? Wow. That is something. I don't even know what to say. So we're already coming into my target, my low of the week area, the 900s. So yeah, I guess that's pretty telling, guys. This is why I said, like, I have concepts of a plan, but who knows where we may go. There's plenty of opportunity this week. It's clearly going to be volatile. There's clearly going to be plenty of trade opportunities. So do not feel like you need to just start throwing on long or short in this area. This could be a pretty wild Globex. Who knows? Maybe I'll trade something later tonight. But for the time being, I mean, guys, do be careful. This is going to get a little weird. It's going to be wild. This is the new normal. So let's zoom out then, since NQ just decided to basically go all the way to the bottom edge of value that we've been in for weeks. The area down, just like we said on ES, is going to be the November lows, or not November lows, but the election lows down here towards 20,325 would be that low. Don't know if we're going to get all the way down there, like I said. But if we were to lose last week's range, that's a reasonable target of where I'd expect price to at least go and entertain. This is kind of insane. I got to say that after 2 Sundays of being on with you guys and being the first person to kind of look at this live with y'all, this is crazy. I mean, have we seen Sunday gaps like this since COVID? I think we had a couple when the 2022 back in like April, but it wasn't really like this. We did, I think, with that initial move down after 2021 and heading into 2022, but I don't remember like wild Sunday gap downs back-to-back weeks like this. So maybe not, but just be careful, guys, as always. Like I said, on NQ, if this area were to hold, so last week's lows hold, then I would expect us to kind of start rotating back into this value and perhaps go all the way back to what I was saying, the 21,400s. That's a reasonable place that I would expect sellers to potentially come in at this point and re-offer, since now we're talking about price being below it. How do we react? Well, you want to see, do buyers eventually step into this area? Do they hold us above 21,000? And if you see them with some enthusiasm, continuing to build some volume above these levels, at least the gap down, you can try along back up into the, higher points of volume in this value area. But I'm not going to be the first person to try to knife catch this. It really would have to be something like Sunday, where as we get into the pre-market, you see like the London session, everybody else buying the dip, we start drifting upwards a little bit. Then you can feel pretty safe, taking a stab long at a certain point. But always in the Sunday Globex session, I'm just never going to be the first person to try to knife catch this, because I wanted to last Sunday and I would have gotten absolutely steamrolled with this price action as we were just gapping down. I mean, the spread's pretty reasonable on ES, on NQ. I mean, guys, this is insane. There's like ones on this, and the spread is like 2. There's a 42 lot somehow. Someone's trying to get out of here at 21,000, but it's just that thin. That's crazy. So, yeah, election lows to the downside, rotating back into value to the upside, back towards 21,400s. That's really my read. This is wild, guys. Absolutely wild. Someone saw 27 points of spread on NQ at the open. Wow. Anybody taking a trade yet? I just got to ask in the equities. Just got to get it out there. See how y'all are doing. I realized I look really orange, so I just had to fix my lighting. That's better. On MNQ, 2 micros long, I shorted MES. You guys are insane. Good for you. Anyone make money? Y'all safe? Practice account short, Coach Jay. Someone is short right now. I mean, guys, this is like 15 points of whipsaw in a second. Please be careful. All right, since the equities are just out of control and we're already at the bottom edge of the value and you guys know where we might go, I mean, you'd be looking, like I said, longs near the previous week low, perhaps down to 20,700 if you got more weakness before maybe we took out that election low number. So yeah, gotta be a fun week. Look at that. We just ripped 70 points in the last like 20 seconds. Good God. All right, I'm going to jump over to GC before I have a seizure looking at the DOM right now. So, in a much more stable trade, let's talk a little bit about gold. Continuing its meteoric rise to the eventual number that is 3,000. If you guys remember, I was half jokingly, half not jokingly saying, you know, eventually that recession type trade, where when markets are uncertain, you just start seeing people buy gold, and you got that move, and we've been on this breakout ever since August, and now it seems like it's kind of making that next leg higher. We made a new all-time high last week. So from here, do we drift back down towards the 2800s, the 2770s, 2780s, or do we fall back and kind of retest the top edge of this value range that we were in before breaking out up here down into the 2700s? It's very possible. Even looking at this going back to October, it's reasonable to think before we continue on and go hit another air horn or go to 3,000 like I would love, that we may go back and retest 2,800. So since we just made a meteoric move to make a new all-time high last week, whatever this was on Thursday, I think it just shot to the moon. Now that we're kind of we fell off that old high. Up here towards the 2850s, do we reoffer? Do I see sellers continue to step in here, or do we just keep marching higher? Personally, if I was long gold, I may cover like a very small portion. If I was in that swing, you guys remember the swing long from the night my child was being born that I covered pretty fast? Because we got a stupid move in, a couple hours, and I covered. And I wish I was still holding that trade, because this is the type of move that I was eventually hoping for, but I also was trying to be a responsible trader and not continue to trade at that time in my life. But anyway, I would expect to see sellers reoffer a little bit. Maybe if we fill in some of this volume back down towards 2817s, 2820s before maybe we continue a little bit higher. I'm just not as enthusiastic about initiating a long up here at the all-time high. I'd much rather try to, get back in long down here towards 2800s, maybe even a little lower if we came back into this old range a tad, 2770s, things like that, to eventually catch that larger move back up. So I would not be shocked to see sellers continue to kind of reoffer and push us back into at least a retest of this general area at the 2800s. So we'll see. But gold was a hell of a trade last week. If you were long, if you've been trying to fight this, I mean, that's tough sledding. I think we've been talking about only looking for longs in crude for a couple months now, or not crude, in gold. And obviously there's been some larger reoffers and things here. I don't know if we're going to get that this week, but personally, I'm not buying it here. I would much rather be looking for a long at cheaper prices personally, but you guys are going to do what you do. But so far that's a third time we kind of came up to those 2860s, and sellers stepped right in to maybe take profit, maybe just reoffer, maybe initiate shorts, who knows? But I want to buy gold back down at a higher area of volume versus being the first idiot to long the all-time high and hope that we continue this move up, which was just crazy to see last week. I think it was Thursday morning I woke up and I was like, I've been looking at equities and dealing with that, and it's just like I could have just longed gold out of the gate and just walked away. So now we're up 100 points since we started talking about how stupid the DOM was on the Nasdaq. So if you were long, congratulations, hell of a trade, hell of a hold. I don't have the cojones for it. All right, let's jump over to crude. Still drill season, but naturally, we are drifting a little bit higher. Is that a gap up? It is. We did gap up in crude. Back up towards, what is this, 74s? Let me zoom out a little bit. Sorry, guys. Trying to get my lay of the land of where we actually are trading. 74.40s. So pretty much near the bottom. We came up, we gapped up near the bottom of the previous week's range, not last week's range. And so far, is this now, or was, okay. So I guess let's go back to Sunday. We had talked a little bit about, the drill baby drill stuff. And eventually, I think my first instinct was to say there was a potential like rebid long off, I want to say it was like 70, I think I said like 74s to 73.80s maybe, that you might get a kind of reflexive rebid, maybe go retest 75s before continuing down. I think you got a little pop, but then we just melted through it and came back to the top of the old, balance range basically we were in and retested the breakout. So now, do we continue to kind of balance between 72s and 75, 76s in crude? It's very possible, but the same logic that was selling this down, I would be more expecting a continued reoffer a little bit higher. Perhaps, like I said, in like kind of those 76 areas, the 75, 30s maybe, where sellers may continue to kind of reoffer and push us back down. I don't know if the top of that balance area is going to hold right now with the drill baby drill narrative and what more supply in the market's going to do. But when we get super geopolitical versus just technical is where I kind of just throw my hands up and say, this is why I don't trade crude, because the breakout made sense. The reoffer when Trump's talking about opening up, less regulation and restrictions on U.S. petroleum production and just the resources we have here in this country, it kind of makes sense that you would see a sell down, at least driven by that narrative. And now that we're kind of in a range, it seems it's tough to have too much of an edge, because obviously that could continue. We could fall back into that old balance range, or we could go retest the highs of that breakout, perhaps go all the way to 80s. So for the time being, this looks like we may have put in at least a temporary bottom in the early parts of this week. There's nothing wrong with trying another long back towards the old top of that balance range to see if you can catch this exact type of move. This gap up, I know, is a little different, but that trip back up to 76 would also make perfect sense if this is going to act as a new range bottom that we may traverse in as we are continuing to kind of, navigate this new narrative on potentially more supply coming from the US and the tariff stuff, everything else. All is going to affect, crude, imports, exports, production, all of that fun stuff. Welcome to the new normal. That is this market, everybody, where it's going to be very news driven for the next few weeks. We just kind of have to have like I said, have concepts of a plan of what you're going to do at certain spots, but be ready to throw that plan in the garbage real quick as soon as someone decides to say something, tweet something, or there's a new bill in Congress. Who knows? So this is, at least going forward, that's kind of how I'm structuring my plans for the week. It's have my levels, have ideas, but do not get married to anything, because the volatility can change in a heartbeat, and it can be just as violent to the upside as it is to the downside. So, and that can be for any and all trading assets. It can be for, Forex. If you trade that circus at times, especially when we're talking about tariffs and the percentage of that being a country's GDP, that's going to affect something like the Canadian dollar, the Mexican peso. And so and then you start seeing, how does that affect the US dollar? And that can affect equity. So you start to see these different things not necessarily have correlations too, but it's just other reasons for the market to do certain things. So that's kind of why I'm saying, like, I have a plan, but it's really not a plan I am absolutely married to in any of these asset classes. All right. So, as always, on this show, we do like to go over some questions with people. So as I'm continuing to go through, I'm going to go through some earnings that are coming up this week. If you guys have questions, if there's things you want me to dive into a little bit further about my trading style, whatever it may be, my thoughts on the markets, if I even have any at this point, whatever's on y'all's mind, I'm happy to get answered here. We'll start compiling them, and towards the latter half of tonight's show, I will answer them to the best of my knowledge when we get there. Looks like sellers trying to defend the 21,100s, reoffering a little bit and moving lower. Wow. Anybody still trading this? Anybody still in a trade? Let's go to earnings first. Hell no, no way. All right, let's talk a little bit about earnings. All right, so we had the kickoff of the Mag 7 earnings last week with Meta, Tesla, Microsoft, and Apple. Now we have another two, as well as a few other names that can absolutely make people very happy or very upset. Kicking off Monday, Palantir is reporting earnings. I know Jim Cramer definitely put a nail in the coffin with them, calling for 100. And I think we've just been kind of chopping and reoffering a little bit higher since then. But we do get to have their earnings. I have a lot of trading buddies that for some reason, everybody seemed to buy its own shares at like $7. And I just never bought it. I don't know why. Still to this day, I don't exactly know what they do. I have a little bit of an idea, but I really have never dug too deep into the company for some reason. I don't know what it is. And now I'm too stubborn to do it because I missed the trade. On Tuesday, you do have AMD, Google, Snapchat, and everyone's favorite fast food chain to hate, Chipotle. So the big one to watch obviously is going to be Alphabet. And I guess as far as the semi names, like AMD just being this massive laggard for some reason, I never really took advantage of the AI trade. Has pretty much just been drifting downwards and being range bound for months and months and months. Maybe they finally break out of it, or is this finally the nail in the coffin that kind of just sends them back and says there really is currently one player in this space and it's NVIDIA. We'll see. You do have Uber. Oh, and then ARM, of course. And then the big one on Thursday with Microsoft being a little soft on their cloud guidance. I'm curious to see what Amazon and AWS have to say, as well as obviously seeing what GCP talks about during Google's earnings. Obviously, that's just a portion of all the things that Google does these days, but their cloud revenue still tends to move the market and move the stock more than just about everything else outside of advertising. So that's kind of the gist. There are a lot of large names this week, but the ones that are going to move the market, you guys know what they are going to be Amazon and Google, with a few others that could tell a story. But for the most part, that's what everyone's going to be paying attention to this week. And we are drifting back down, 100 points up, 100 points down. Who's not having fun trading the Nasdaq this evening? My word. Absolute carnage. Up and down. This is why also what I was coming on the air and kind of saying, guys, like it's a week where if you caught a stupid rip of 60 to 100 points like that and it's this illiquid, like get your points, get out. There's going to be another trade tomorrow. Holding that all the way back to break even at this point is just insane and crazy. So hopefully you guys, if you are trading this, see profit, take profit. If you happen to be on the right side of the algos doing the algo things right now with this spread, take it and run. Come back for the open tomorrow. Yeah. As Coach Hoop just said, there's nothing wrong with waiting until the New York Open when volume returns and there is some level of normalcy in the way the price is going to move. All right. So on the economic calendar front, we do have our favorite Fed speakers back this week. They are doing their world tour. They are coming just like Trump is to stop you out of trades out of nowhere because their words will move the markets once again, especially coming after an FOMC week. There's going to be a lot of questions probably on their guidance, their dot plot, their thoughts on PCE on Friday, their thoughts on cuts this year, the dot plot, everything else. So they are back every day this week at different times and probably different things that will matter. I don't know who's giving remarks on economic policy versus just being a speaker at some random symposium or charity event, but there is a bunch of them this week. So do be aware if you are trading at various times this week, maybe have a good idea on when some of these speeches are going to be going on. As always on TopstepTV, we will alert you as we are drifting closer and we'll give you their tidbits or any, buzzwords that come out of their mouths, we will keep you guys informed, especially if it's driving some price action in our day-to-day. But outside of the Fed speakers, we do have S&P Global Manufacturing PMI and ISM PMI tomorrow after the bell. So at 8:45 and at 9, you will have that classic algo spasm that is just kind of annoying if you're somebody like me that waits usually a little bit before jumping into a trade. I almost have to wait a little longer for the dust to settle. And then at that point, did I already miss the move? It's very possible. Happened to me the other day. And then on Tuesday, we do have jolts at 9 a.m. So not 7:30. This will be at, wait, am I on the wrong time? I actually think I am. No, I am on the right time. Okay, 9 a.m. jolts. And I don't know why I thought this was on Eastern time, which I would absolutely hate. I hate Eastern time. It's a long story. And then on Wednesday, we do have ISM Services PMI and a gaggle of Fed speak. Imports, exports, balance of trade. Barkin's talking pre-market. Thursday, jobless claims. And then Friday, the big one, the unemployment rate and non-farm payrolls, as well as Michigan consumer sentiment. So the usual gaggle of random Fed speakers, as well as nothing crazy, but our usual pre-market nonsense that likes to just ruin everyone's trading opportunities in the early parts of the session. So just like with any of these guys, a tweet can come out of nowhere. So be careful, take profit, get out, call it a day, come back the next session. There's nothing wrong with it. You catch a good trade and there's not chaos going on. You don't need to wait for the chaos to stop you out and then say, okay, now I'm done. There's going to be so many opportunities this week, whether it's event volatility, whether it's a reaction based on a Fed speaker, whether it's something the president tweets. There's volatility is back and it's here to stay, at least for the coming weeks. So hence why I'm saying if you get a good move, there's nothing wrong with locking it in, hitting that lockout button, coming back the next session to take out more points. Coach Troop, Bitcoin down almost 5%. Wasn't it down like 3 or 4 to even be coming into this? I don't know. I got to double check. I think I saw it like under 100. I just didn't know how far it went. Yeah, Trump market is wild and beautiful. It's going to be a crazy 4 years. All right, let's talk a little bit about options. If you guys remember last Sunday, one thing I was talking about when we were looking at the gamma exposure, I know I had said like to the downside, it was rather limited. Like there was not a lot of negative exposure and a lot of interest in puts. The market was like, I think I said it, just like when you see this, you think are we a little under hedged for like an FOMC week? And I think with the creation of 0-day to expiration options and the weeklies and all the other fun stuff and all the single stock ones, like you don't see like periodic hedging as much. You see it just in time. So like right before we get towards an event, then you see hedges get put on and things. So now it actually looks like people are a little bit more protected for downside. Just seeing that the market makers and dealers, there's just a little bit more exposure to the downside. So it seems like maybe a little bit of last week's tweeting storm decided to create a little interest in downside protection or some interest in downside positions. Not looking at it much more than that, because the second things are positive and some of these downside hedges come off in theory, we can shoot up so freaking fast. It's not even funny. So the big strikes to watch is basically where we closed on Friday, going to be that 60-50s kind of area. But the other one, still the largest, over as far as gamma exposure from the gross perspective, is still that big round number that we saw at 6,000. So a little bit further, or may have been where's the S trading right now? So a little bit, or no, we are actually below it right now because we gapped down. Sorry. Apologize. I forgot. ES gap down 100 points, not 10 points. Like for some reason, my brain was thinking. So we are below this. So as always, when we look at this, it's more important. This is Friday's close. What does it look like tomorrow when we come into the open as people reposition or adjust for this type of downside already? We'll see. So just know downside could be limited just based on the fact that we saw towards the end of the week, people actually positioning to the downside for downside. So when that happens, it just can at times limit some risk. It just depends how low we go. But 100 points, 2.5% down already on the Nasdaq. Wish I was still holding my shorts. Someday I will actually do that. I'm so risk adverse, guys. Sometimes it kills me when things like this happen. Anyway. All right. So that is the gist. Let's jump back over to ES. And, oh, wow, we are still teetering on those lows. Anybody brave enough to knife catch this down here the first time? I'm not. That is wild to look at. All right, so we're going to get to some questions. If you have any, please throw them into the chat. We will start grabbing them, and I will get to answering. We've got about 20 minutes left in tonight's session, so we will get to as many questions as humanly possible. Are you going to meet with your VIP group? Yes, that is a plan this week. I think the VIP program officially is like kicking off. I mean, technically, I think it is now. I believe you guys all got or maybe got access to your VIP combines. So we will get cracking this week is kind of my plan. I'm going to be active in the Discord a little more, helping traders out. I'd like to meet with my team, kind of get a gist for what people want from me too. Because I can be as involved or as little involved as humanly possible. It just depends on what people are really looking for from me outside of just, helping out, being a coach, things like that, advice, perspective, guidance, prep. Like I will happily do any and all of those things or none of them if people really want me to be more hands off. So we'll meet with my group and we'll probably do a majority rule on what people actually want from me. But I'm looking forward to meeting you guys if you are on my team, and we'll kind of get cranking this week. So with everybody, if you are on my team, please. I do not want to hear people blowing the combines, their combine the first day tomorrow. That would just be a very, very poor start to wanting to do this program and help traders and coach. So hopefully nobody's doing that. I definitely think if you are going to trade it tomorrow, your VIP combines, perhaps wait into the New York Open a little bit. Maybe that's just my piece of advice. Not when it's the sell liquid. Would love to hear more on how you use volume. So the biggest piece, or the way I use volume, I would say more than anything, and there's really two. For my execution chart, or what I am really looking at intraday outside of my longer time frame ones. So my short one that kind of gives me guidance on how I'm reading the market, when I want to jump in and out of a trade. I use volume based candles. So I'll use like a 500 volume. I'll use 1500 volume. It just depends on time frame, what I'm trying to do exactly, and what I'm trading as well. But I typically use that to kind of print my candles versus using minute by minute. So just a slightly different way to look at the same thing. And then I use volume profile. So volume profile, I think we've talked about it a lot on the show because it's kind of how I break down and define some of my levels at times, is really just giving you a histogram view of volume by price. So it's telling you the highs and lows as far as where the most buying and selling took place. And last week, looking at this big red line is going to be the point of control, which tells you the most buying and selling took place there at 60.82s. So I use this to basically guide where we are trading in the auction. Are we in an area of like high interest, low interest? When you trade off volume profile, a lot of the time the market will trade in value ranges. So like this white area here, I know this is a random time frame, but you get what I'm saying. So price does not spend a ton of time in low volume areas. So in theory, if we were to approach one of them, like come down into this low volume node here, down towards 59.20s and reject and kind of start coming back up, I know that's a decently safe long to get onto and ride it back into an area of higher volume because there wasn't a lot of interest transacting down here. but there is a lot of interest in buying or in selling up here towards 59.88s. So that is kind of how I use volume. I really use it by price. I don't use it. I don't care about the candles at the bottom as much. I read price action in a slightly different way. So me seeing a huge volume spike, just as total volume is not as telling to me on what is the delta of that volume and how did that delta look on a various, specific time frame or whatever. That's more telling to me, which is another level of kind of looking at the volume from a buyer's or seller's perspective, who's basically winning that fight. So there's we could go down such rabbit holes with this, but that's pretty much how I use it day in and day out. A lot of my prep going into a session or going into the week is going to be based on volume by price. That's how I define a lot of my levels. Like when I mark other things like my 4-hour chart, a lot of it's based on value area highs, value area lows, points of control, of areas I want to interact with or don't, things like that. Nick, is there any way you could record your sessions for us who don't make the VIP list? Is that something you can do or no? I'll reach out to the Topstep team. I'm not sure. If I were to do it in the kind of wider coaches channel on their Discord, I would imagine anybody could in theory join. So I'll put a feeler out there to see what we can do. But like I said, guys, I'm going to be more involved in Discord and things like that going forward. So if you need something, if you have a question, mention me, shoot me a DM, whatever works. I'm happy to help anybody that is willing to, ask for it. So, but as far as my sessions, I highly doubt we're going to record them, but let me see if we can open it up, or if that's something people would be interested in. I'm happy to do it for a wider audience as well. If there's specific things you guys want me to spend more time on, obviously this is not like this show is not a coaching hour. I just like to help break down the week, how I'm seeing it, where I may want to engage at times. But I feel like we don't get too in the weeds of education here just because it can be such a time suck. So I'm going to be more involved. It just comes down to like, at what level is it too much for me? And what is the best way to do it for my team first, as well as a wider audience of traders? So we're talking about some of those things behind the scenes. I just very early stage on what that looks like, but I will absolutely do what I can to, see how wide we can make certain things. I'm a big fan of Anna Cooling's book about volume and price analysis. You use her principles too, Nick. I'm not as familiar with some of her teachings about it. I don't know where my pen is. Let me write that so I can actually look that up a little bit. Like I said, I don't know her principles exactly, but I would imagine if it's volume by price, there's probably some overlap of things that I have learned from other people, but I'd be curious to check it out. Nick, your chart looks pretty amazing. Can you show us your indicators? Sure. I think it's a bit messy right now. Sometimes when I do the show, it's like messy because I'm constantly jumping through time frames and like zooming out so I can look at certain things with you guys. But as far as my indicator list in Topstep X, I keep it pretty simple, guys. My execution chart is usually pretty simple. 99% of what you see on my execution chart, whether it's in Topstep X or anything else that I'm kind of, executing and trading on, is going to be, you're going to see some aspect of volume profile from whatever time frame I care. It could be the session. It could be the session plus Globex. It could be, the previous week. It could be the previous session. It just really depends on kind of what I'm looking at. So you'll always see a visible range volume profile, and then usually a specific time frame one that's more fixed. So if you like to, I don't think because MGI will a lot of the time, no matter what platform you use, will spit out value area lows, value area highs, point of control from the previous session. I don't see a ton of value in muddying up your chart by doing a daily volume profile like this. But from a week perspective, if you were to jump back in and actually trade off like a 1 minute or 5 minute, whatever you're doing, it doesn't usually get in the way visually. So I will always have some aspect of a fixed volume profile on there. And then I use on my 5 minute charts, ignore it on the 1 hour, but I use a 21 EMA on a 5 minute. It just is a good way to, if you're day trading, to see that you're on like the right side of trend at times. So I just do it in green. That's that green line you see. And then I do basically a 24-hour VWAP. So that's pretty much it. Oh, and then the Topstep daily levels, just because I'm too lazy to plot some of these, like the previous or yesterday's value area high, value area low, settlement. And then I like having Hoag's levels on there because I draw a lot of my own levels that you won't see in Topstep X. But I do like when some of mine overlap with some things that Hoag's seeing as well, just from, a market profile perspective. He's got his own little secret sauce that he uses to define these levels. So I like to have them on there as well. It's a good at times too, just like an ATR to keep myself honest. Just especially if my ranges for the week or my thoughts are a little tighter than his or a little wider, it's good to still have. So I use the Topstep daily levels, and you can remove and add more, whatever you're feeling. But that's pretty much my execution charts. Everything will always be volume profile and an MGI is on every single charting platform that I use. That's pretty much that's a lot of how I trade. Nick, last week you were going over your risk reward ratio and the fact that your trading is a bit more aggressive than other traders on Topstep TV. Can you go a little bit more deep in your style? So yeah, I think during the reversal challenge, this question was asked, and I was struggling to answer it because I was in trades. But yes, if you've ever seen like my stats that are on the leaderboard and things, like you'll see like a 1-to-2 risk reward ratio. Most of that comes down to like, I can be pretty quick at cutting trades and taking profit, whether it's for 10 points, 20 points, 30 points on NQ. It could be $600, but I'm still I may do that at times, but I'm also pretty much locked in at like 15 to 20 points for a stop on NQ with 3 contracts. So I will hit, like, if you can kind of see how the risk reward ratio gets backwards when I have $900 winning days because I lock out because I hit my first trade and I'm like, you know what, this is good enough for me. I'm not really seeing anything else I really want to interact with. I don't want to put more money at risk and I'm going to call it a day. You see how I will lock in that day, but then I'm also guilty of club DLL. Honestly, guys, and this is full transparency, you don't see me take a lot of like 1K losing days, 2K losing days. You'll see me take my 2 to 3 stop outs. And that is where you see my risk reward go backwards. Cause I will happily lock up a, $800,000, $3,000 day, whatever. But my losing days are still likely to be somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. So it can absolutely flip my risk reward a little bit there because I have smaller winning days and I'm happy with that. I will still usually, unless I'm just like after my first trade, I'm like, I am not seeing this well. I need to take a break. I need to come back tomorrow. It's rare those situations happen, but they do. Most of the time it's a 3 strikes and you're out, daily loss limit type thing for me, against, anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000 winning day most of the time. So that's kind of how my risk reward is backwards. I am very much regimented in, I'm going to use a 20-point stop on NQ. I'm going for somewhere between 10 and 30 points. It just depends on how price action is. And I'm guilty too of taking profit too early sometimes. I think everybody on Tuesday, if you were watching Fast Markets with Dakota and I, within about 10 seconds of covering my trade at a good spot where sellers absolutely could have reoffered, but then I watched another 30 seconds of price action and made the distinction. I'm like, I'm pretty sure looking at this and looking at the 5-minute structure, that's the low of the day right there. That is absolutely going to be the low of the day. And of course it was. And I covered for, I think 8-9 points on an ES long. And I think Dakota covered for like 40 and it ran another 100 points. It is what it is. But that's kind of how my risk reward can get backwards. Sometimes I'm a little too scalpy and don't let my trade, like my thesis hadn't changed. So naturally, I should still be in the trade. So that's something I'm continuing to kind of work on with myself, is not necessarily holding my winners longer. It's more, is the reason you got in this trade, has anything changed? If this trade was purely just to go from X to Y and that was the trade and that was the read, that's fine. But if the trade was, this is a good low that I'm going to knife catch and go long, why am I getting out of this unless I have a fear that they're going to take out that low? And in which case, my stop should be break even or should be at my original placement. So these are internal things that I'm still working on and playing around with a little more myself. Do you trade bonds? I do not. I don't have, this is a joke from a trading mentor of mine, but I don't have 45 minutes in a trade to just learn, am I going to be right or wrong? So no, I don't trade bonds. I need to learn, am I wrong on this trade in about a minute? I don't have an hour to decide, am I wrong and buy a 2-tick entry or something? No, I've always wanted to trade bonds. I just, honestly, it's just like a snooze fest to watch. So I don't even bother learning sometimes to do it. There's definitely days it moves, but most of the time when I've even looked at it, it's just like, I'm not bothering with this. So now we revisited the same low from the DeepSeek sell-off. What does it mean for the rest of the week in NQ? Honestly, guys, I have absolutely no idea. We took out the previous week's low. So if we can get back above, let's say 6,000 on ES, I would say, hey, maybe we continue to balance in the early parts of this week. Like I said, there is still some Mag 7 earnings on deck, so it's hard to get too bearish unless, it's all going to be news driven and catalyst driven, which a Trump tweet can be, at least in the short term. But this market is going to die on the hill of buying the dip over the last 2 years. And you're usually like a genius when you do it at the right time. So we absolutely could just balance in last week's range during this, early parts of this Globex session. But the fact that we took it out, we could continue going lower. Or we're back to, 3 weeks ago when the sky was falling and, everything was a mess down here towards the 5,800s. So I don't really have a good edge, guys, as far as going this week. I'm going to very much be trading based on momentum and price action in that direction. I'm logically not going to fade a lot of these moves. If I see a drift up higher and sellers step in like they did on Friday, I am absolutely jumping on that train. But I am not trying to knife catch this. I'd much rather reoffer or wait for it to start to build a little bit to get long with it. You're just not going to see me. I'm going to try not to be jumping into too many early trades. I just think there's too many opportunities this week, and I'd rather not take stop outs trying to knife catch personally. All right. That is all the questions. I think that's all the questions. Yep. All right, guys. So, recap for this week. We gapped down well below my weekly pivots. And we are below 6,000 as well, and took out the previous week's volume profile. So from here, I would love to see us build back above this high volume edge here, this old point of control from 2 weeks ago, basically the 6,000 area. If we don't get above that, it's reasonable to think we may go test some of these lows going back a few weeks. To the upside, knowing that we had this type of move down, whether it's Mag 7 earnings, I would still be watching this spot up here towards the 60, 75, 60, 80s to see if that is another spot that sellers, if we did drift up and go a little higher, do sellers reoffer here is kind of the question I'm kind of looking at. Or do they reoffer around the 6,000s? But for the time being, this is not something I want to jump out outside of scalping here and there. Like, I'm not looking to jump into a long in this area, knowing that we've had this move down. Obviously, I hate Sunday Globex gaps because it's just something I worry about all week. Granted, it took us the entire week of trading to fill the previous Sunday gap. So there's no reason to think that it may not happen this week. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen tonight for all I know. But I hate Sunday gaps because it just lingers in the back of my mind, especially when they're to the downside like this. It just makes me not comfortable in any short on any time frame, just because I'm so worried eventually I'm going to be in it when it just rips back up to go fill that gap. So that is the show, guys. I hope this has been helpful for some. I know this has been an insane, wild last 2 Sundays of a Globex Open. So going into this week, please be safe. Please be careful. Size down if you must. If you're an NQ trader and it's a little too much for you, if you don't want to use micros, for the love of God, trade ES. That is my advice. Just take it slow. Don't ruin your whole week by trading the Sunday Open and just getting stopped out on this illiquid garbage at times. Live for the New York Open. I do think it is still the better trade. I mean, we'll see. I'm sure Coach Dakota is going to be trying to trade this in a couple hours. So tune into his show. I will be on TopstepTV on Tuesday for Fast Markets, as well as the defending my title in the reversal challenge next Friday, or this Friday. I think we had a new record is the news on the street. $18,500, the new reversal challenge record. So I'll be defending my title on Friday afternoon to give you guys some entertainment. Hopefully we get a little bit of volatility, because Friday was a bit of a, I don't know how I made $18,000 in that little 30-point range, but we did. So yeah, I will see you guys later this week. I'm excited to hang out with my team a little bit in the Top Tip Discord and help everybody that wants to be helped. So as always, guys, trade safe. I will see you guys later this week. Everybody have a wonderful evening. Enjoy a taste of Sunday without the NFL. Next week is the last game until August. It's pretty sad. Actually, another quick thing. I might try to see if we can swing market kickoff a smidge earlier on Super Bowl Sunday. Like maybe we start at 4:30, because kickoff for the Super Bowl is at 5:30 Central Time. So I'm going to talk to the team and see if that makes more sense. If you guys are okay with being a little 15 minutes earlier, making sure we get the prep in, we can still watch the Sunday Open. But I'd like to get the show done before, and let everybody go watch the game and enjoy the game. And I don't want to leave you guys hanging by not doing the show. So let me talk to them and see if we can do it a little earlier. That way we can all get to what we want to do, which is go watch the Super Bowl. So I'll leave it there. Everybody have a wonderful evening. Trade safe, and I will see you guys tomorrow in the chat, as well as on Tuesday on Fast Markets. Cheers, guys.